Welcome, everyone. Let's see who's in the building. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome, Matthew. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Thriving Dentist Expert Panel. I'm your host for this session, Dan Disha. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And tonight we are having a honest conversation about a decision more dentists are facing. DSO, associate or independent. The goal is not to tell you which path is right. It's to help you understand what changes financially, professionally, and personally so that you can make more deliberate decisions. Mark William was scheduled to join us tonight and unfortunately wasn't able to make the session. We wish him well. Now, a couple of quick housekeeping notes to help you get the most out of this session. First, yes, we are recording and you will receive a replay link after the session, but do not let that make you passive because the real value is happening right here, right now, live. Go ahead and use the Q&A button for questions you want the panelists to answer and use the chat for conversation. I have my eye on both the feeds and will do my best to weave in your concerns as we move along. Now, before we get into the ownership decision, one practical truth applies whichever path you choose. A practice still needs the right patients to find it, trust it, and book it. The insight on this slide is simple. Fix the booking gap with targeting, trust, and clear path to schedule. That means attracting the right audience, building confidence quickly through reputation and education, and making the next step obvious. Now, Echo Marketing, founded by Naren Arulraja, a co-host on the Thriving Dentist podcast alongside Gary Takas, is the Thriving Dentist marketing partner and supports dental practices across North America. We will hear more from Equa a little later in the program. So let's go ahead and meet our panelists and then get into the discussion. First up, we have Jeremy Prickel, CPA, partner and shareholder at Johns and Roth, and a leader on the firm's management team. He works closely with dental and healthcare practices on practice benchmarking, cash flow planning, business strategy, and tax planning. He's a frequent speaker on the dental and healthcare accounting. Jeremy brings the financial lens to tonight's conversation. The numbers actually say before an owner makes a career-defining decision. Jeremy, it's a pleasure and privilege to have you here on our panel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Next up, we have Dr. Katherine Yale. Dr. Yale is a general dentist, innovation advocate, and an emerging leader focused on the future of dentistry. As an associate dentist with PDS Health, she brings firsthand insight into opportunities and challenges facing early career clinicians. Her work connects clinical care, technology, and business with the goal of improving patient outcomes, provider experience, and, of course, practice performance. Dr. Yale, welcome to the panel.
Guys, and I'm actually can you hear me? Is
Yes,
this
yes,
working?
Dr. Yale.
Okay. I've actually moved into an ownership role. I'm partnered with PDS now on an office here in LA.
Okay, that's great because that steps uh, very nicely into the first question I actually have for you, Dr. Yale. And that is from the associate side, what changes most in the day-to-day once a practice is operating inside a DSO? Would love to get your perspective now that you're on a partnership level.
Yeah, so so kind of background on me and how I got here. So when I was a dental student, I graduated in May 2025. So I've been out a little over a year. I actually got to know my organization relatively early. I started with where I wanted to live, and I knew I wanted to come back to LA where I'm from. So I actually knew people within the organization for a few years prior to graduating. Then, about 6 months prior to my graduation, I started looking for offices in my area. I ended up meeting Dr. Hannah, who is my partner in this office, and I actually worked for him for the first year in practice at another office in the LA area. as an associate, but my experience was a bit unique in the sense that I was in the office 5 days a week and he joined me in the office twice a week. So I was the only full-time doctor in that office. That was my choice. That's how I wanted it to be. I looked for certain things when I was coming out of school, and I can kind of get into that if people are interested. But I would say moving into an ownership role was essentially for me, for a lack of a better word, getting rid of the training wheels of having my owner doctor with me twice a week. So, in terms of the difference, not a ton. I think regardless, you're learning to work with the team, you're learning to, patient care and communication. Obviously, there's a difference in compensation, which, Jeremy can tell you like the tax benefits of being an owner versus an associate. Um, but especially in a DSO setting, all of the kind of business tasks that are assigned to you as an owner are taken care of by the larger organization. So, a lot of things that you think, kind of add to um, the plate of being an owner is made easier by the large organization.
Such as what are like the top three that you find most easy to have been delegated to the DSO?
So in terms of ordering supplies, they are really great at getting us really great deals. Think of like buying from a Costco versus like your local grocery store. So there's great deals on supplies. Typically, offices are already set up with staff. When you come in, they will find staff for you. So, for instance, I'm not putting up an ad looking for a hygienist. The organization as a whole is doing that for you. In addition to that, let's see. They have like models, so, when you come into an office, especially as someone that's a new grad, right? You're learning the patient communication aspect. A lot of DSOs have standardized ways to go about appointments that are helpful for not only you as a doctor, but for the patient as well to make sure that you're communicating in the best way possible what's going on.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that, Dr. Yale, and that's a great opener right off the bat. Jeremy, when a DSO offer lands, what is the first financial number you normalize before deciding whether the headlining valuation is actually attractive?
Well, I think, you know, I would say, first of all, one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of doctors have when they are deciding to join a DSO or deciding to pursue ownership, is really that compensation is the same as wealth, and that's really two different things, and they should be evaluated very differently. So, for example, a DSO or an associate position may offer a higher early guaranteed salary at the beginning, which can be super enticing, especially when you've got a bunch of student debt and whatnot. But ownership really introduces something associates typically don't have or don't think about, and that's long-term equity or value. And that might be the value of the practice. It might be the value of a building ownership, things like that. So many dentists focus on basically what they'll make this year rather than what they're building on over the next 10 or 20 or possibly 30 years of practice ownership. Um, an owner may and initially earn a similar income to an associate, but they're also creating practice value that can actually be sold at some point in the future. So it kind of acts as another retirement plan. Now, I don't want my clients focusing on that being their only retirement asset. So I really focus on building wealth outside the value of the practice itself. So um, another misunderstanding would be the difference between, revenue and take-home pay. Uh, you know, Dentists often compare production percentages without fully understanding the benefit packages or retirement contributions or continuing education reimbursements, insurance costs, and other kind of tax ramifications that can really change the economics of a potential offer. So, my advice is to evaluate total economic value and not just the annual compensation that's being offered. You really have to look at the long-term outcome of a decision that you're making.
Mhm. Jeremy, can you speak a little bit more on that building wealth outside the practice? What do you mean by that?
So, just like, in any profession, we would want you contributing money to a retirement plan like a 401k, potentially maxing out uh, Roth IRA contributions. Sometimes we'll do a strategy called a backdoor Roth IRA if your income's reached a limit where you can no longer contribute directly to a Roth. So we'll have, the doctor contribute to a traditional IRA and then roll the money to a Roth early on. And so those are strategies that we talk about. We also look at not only wealth accumulation, but we also look at risk. So, like, we want to make sure that you have disability insurance because one of the biggest risks to your profession is, what happens if you can no longer use your hands or you can no longer practice. That is going to take a lot of potential income out of your family's hands. And so, fund your life if you can't practice dentistry? So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Appreciate that clarification, Jeremy. Dr. Yale, what kind of dentist tends to thrive in a DSO environment rather than feeling constrained by it?
Um, I'm curious what would make someone feel constrained to begin with, meaning
Mm.
like lack of clinical autonomy or
Okay, let's talk about that. Lack of clinical autonomy, and then perhaps might not feel that ownership growth necessarily.
I think that as obviously there's standardizations, right, within a DSO in terms of they give you the same like technology in all the offices, they run you through systems that they have in place that work really well. But at the end of the day, everything comes down to the doctors and staff and culture of the office. So if you have a bad experience or feel constrained at, a corporate office, that is your experience at one office, not the experience of the entire organization. Speaking specifically about where I have practiced, I think at the end of the day, everything comes down to fit. So if you're in a place where you don't feel supported or anything like that, that comes down to just the office you're in and the culture that's there, which is why it's so important early on before making a decision of where you're going to work to know what you want and what you're looking for and ensure that the place that you're going can meet those expectations.
So earlier on, you mentioned the same point. Out of school, you were really looking for a perfect fit. Can you please give us a little bit of tips on how to do that?
So I think um, before I graduated dental school, I sent out a survey to my fellow classmates and also schools all around the country. And some of the questions involved asking, rank the following factors on what's most important to you in terms of where your first job is or how you choose your first job. So for a lot of people, location was number one, mentorship was number two, and then I think maybe compensation or potential ownership was number three, something like that. Um, the word mentorship means different things for different people. So I think being really clear on what that means for you is super important. So, for example, are you wanting the doctor that you're working for to sit with you chairside for your first 5 crowns? Or are you looking for someone that is maybe, in my case, very well versed in the business side of dentistry? My partner, he has owned 4 practices with my organization before this one. He has trained other doctors to become owners. So the things that I was looking for was maybe less clinically facing and more about the business side of dentistry. So I think being really clear on what you're looking for with mentorship is a big factor for sure.
Uh, That's really curious. Why were you looking for something more on the business side of dentistry to be the powerhouse uh, as your partner, as opposed to the clinical side?
So the school that I went to gave me a really strong clinical foundation. I felt really confident in my skills. That was confirmed early on when I was practicing with my owner doctor. Everything felt really comfortable. And for the first month that I was working for this organization, I was actually in the same office with him every day. So, I felt confident in that area.
Okay. What I was really looking for was what made you see that the business side of dentistry is an area that you might have less or is as important or pivotal as compared to that clinical side, but is an aspect that you didn't necessarily get an academic uh, education
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jeremy over here was telling me yesterday about, oh, I'm sure you use QuickBooks. And I was like, I will now. When you're in dental school, you learn to be a clinician. You're not getting an MBA. So obviously, there's a ton of support from people like Jeremy who can help you with, tax structure and all that stuff. But there isn't really a lot of information about what it takes to run a business, how to establish it, and that kind of thing. What is a good buy? All of those things. So both Dr. Hannah and Jeremy knows a lot about this too. We actually spoke yesterday, and he's got a lot of knowledge about you know practice ownership and moving into ownership.
Appreciate that, Dr. Yale. Now, Jeremy, when a dentist compares a DSO offer with a private sale, what part of the total consideration is easiest to overvalue?
I would say, you mean like what part of the practice is the easiest to overvalue?
Yes, part of the package in
Yeah,
total
so
is it?
I think when I'm working with a dentist that is deciding whether or not to go DSO route or employment route as an associate versus, starting a practice or buying into a practice, I definitely have them evaluate a few things. And the first thing I have them evaluate is patient flow and provider utilization. So just making sure that there's enough patient flow for them to support the amount of production that they would like to achieve. I also want them to look at their benefits package. So, what type of health insurance is offered from the DSO or from the employer. And then, as Dr. Yale mentioned, mentorship and clinical growth opportunities are very important. Like, do you have somebody there that's helping you? For example, like let's say you want to do implants. Are you working with a doctor that knows how to do implants and can train you on that, and help you get stronger in those areas? And then I would also say pathways to advancement. So, our uh, is there an opportunity to advance? Is there an opportunity to potentially buy in at some point, et cetera? So I would say, for example, like a position paying 30% of production sounds good, but if there's not enough patient flow in that particular office, then your actual income is going to be a lot lower than a position with a smaller percentage and a stronger patient base in another practice. So just like Dr. Yale said, like every opportunity is a different opportunity. Every office is not the same. So you have to evaluate all of those things. I would also, encourage all dentists to ask, how many new patients does the practice see each month? These get into some of our production benchmarks that we evaluate with a lot of our practices. But how quickly do associates reach target production? For example, like if they've had other associates that have been working for the practice, how long did it take them to reach target production? Is compensation based on production or is it based on collections? Those are huge differences in a lot of practices. Some practices are seeing have a lot of PPO contracts that have write-offs. And so the production and collection numbers may be significantly different, whereas you might have another office that doesn't accept insurance at all. So production and collections may be the same number. So you have those kind of things that are very important, and they drastically differ between different practices. So you have to be really careful about what you're evaluating there. I would just say, and closing to that question would be uh, just the quality of that opportunity is going to matter more than the percentage you're getting paid or the salary that you're going to paid in that. So just there's a lot more than just the offer. There's, all of those factors need to be evaluated.
What what about rollover equity? How should an owner think about that when the future exit value is uncertain, to say the least?
Um, you mean like if a DSO comes in and buys a practice?
That's exactly right.
Okay,
Yep.
so
It's yes,
yeah,
so
so
versus a private seller.
I personally think it's just a pie in the sky a little bit. So I generally will tell a dentist that they should feel pretty comfortable with the offer before considering any rollover equity. Obviously, a DSO is not going to like that answer because that's usually the selling point for most DSOs is like, hey, we're going to give you basically what you would sell your practice for, but then there's also this carrot out there for you to make the DSO profitable and do well. So I usually have them be comfortable with the offer before they even evaluate any rollover equity. And I feel like if you're not comfortable with it, it probably isn't a great move.
Okay, okay. Uh, are there any numbers that you say are not necessarily comfortable, but are good in terms of opportunities?
Um, well, before the DSO model came into play, most practices would sell from anywhere from 70 to 100% of collections, essentially, is what you typically see for most dental practices. So somewhere in that ballpark. And so what I've seen is that most DSOs, when they come in and make an offer, they'll offer you something. They should be offering you at least what you're going to get paid if you were to sell the practice to another dentist in the normal course of business. But then the rollover equity, in my opinion, should be above and beyond that amount. So again, kind of look at what a general practice would sell for in your area, somewhere between 70 and 80%, 70, 80, 90% of collections, and then say, well, you should at least be getting that amount of cash upfront for the sale of your practice. And then, anything above that in terms of rollover equity or some type of down down stream payment should be a bonus, is kind of the way I think about it.
Appreciate that, Jeremy. We're going to take a quick pause here because I have something exciting to share on behalf of our growth partner, Echo Marketing. Now, let me see. Yeah, there you go. Now, we've spent the first half separating decisions from the headline pitch, why someone might sell, what life inside a DSO can actually feel like, and how to read the economics instead of just the multiple. Whatever path you choose, there's another layer that matters. If you're building or keeping a practice, the right patients still have to be able to find you, trust you, and book. Now, that is where our sponsor, Echo Marketing, comes in. Echo has spent more than a decade, almost 2 decades now, helping doctors and dentists build stronger digital visibility and patient demand. Tonight, Echo is offering our practice owners and associate dentists a complimentary practice growth session valued at 900 bucks. Their team spends 4 to 5 hours before the session researching your online presence, competitors, and growth opportunities. The goal is to give you a clear view of the path that fits your goals, the financials and operational blind spots worth examining, the growth priorities that matter the most, and of course, a practical action plan at the end of it. So you can go ahead and book that session by scanning the QR code on your screen, or else click the link in the chat below. I do believe our team has dropped it in there. Yes. And yeah, it takes about a minute to book. All you have to do is enter in your practice's location, any further details that you would like to get out of the conversation, and you'll be ready to go. The team will be doing the heavyweight and heavyweight lifting and give you a wonderful session to really figure out your growth priorities for 2026 and beyond. So availability is limited. So if this is useful to you, reserve it while we are together. All right, let's get back to the panel. Dr. Yale, for a younger dentist choosing between a DSO associateship and ownership, what signal tells you a role will actually help you grow rather than simply keep you busy?
Good question. I think it goes back to what I was saying before about just knowing what it is that you are looking for. I will say, especially early on out of school, um, and depending on what area you're in, if it's more urban versus rural or something like that, your options may be limited when it comes to private practice. They do want someone typically that has a little more experience doing things like root canals, third molar extractions, impacted extractions, things like that. A lot of the DSO models are designed to be kind of easier to walk into. So there are specialists that come into the office versus doing everything yourself. Um, for a private office, I think it's great to kind of learn the fundamentals of business in a different way. So, for example, spending a closer look at, okay, what are the material costs? How do we go about hiring someone, right? All the things that I'm not necessarily doing myself, you would get a closer look at in a private office. Um, it's going to be a different pace, at least from what I've experienced myself versus my classmates, but that's just anecdotal. But I think it all just comes down to what you're looking for.
Okay. Now, Jeremy, for an owner considering staying independent, what financial threshold tells you the practice has enough resilience to keep control without simply buying the owner another job?
So can you repeat that question again?
Absolutely. So, for an owner considering staying independent, what financial threshold tells you the practice has enough resilience to keep control without simply buying the owner another job?
Yeah, so I think I guess Dr. Yale touched on this earlier a little bit, but there's definitely a difference between like clinical readiness, which, is like the dentist can consistently generates strong production, understands the economics behind profitability, not just clinical dentistry, but understands the dentistry. And then also like financial, personal financial readiness, like stable personal finances, manageable debt, and so sufficient liquidity to handle the unexpected. So that, like in a practice, that's very important that there's enough funds and management of funds to be able to survive kind of ups and downs. But also, it's also the leadership attributes of the dentist on whether or not they're going to remain independent. So, there's so much more to running the business in an independent setting than going to work at a DSO. So you definitely have to manage people and you've got payroll to make. There's a lot of responsibility in making sure that your employees are getting paid and accept that accountability that comes along with that. So um, I usually want to make sure that that dentist understands the cash flow of the business and has a plan for making sure that all the debt payments get made, maintain reasonable reserves in the practice, and also can maintain consistent production levels because that's that's usually a rub is when you have a dentist that maybe has other family commitments or doesn't want to put in the hours to own a business. It's definitely, owning a business is going to take more time and effort than a typical associate position at a DSO because you've got after the day ends, you've got the management of the finances and you've got the management of the people and who called in sick today, who do you need to go out and recruit. There's a ton more involved in, owning that practice and staying independent than going to a DSO or an associate position. Now, with that, I think you also have
Mm.
a, a bigger potential upside. So you probably have a better opportunity to earn more money over time, or you may have an opportunity to buy multiple practices, or you might have opportunities to put in different types of retirement plans, like a cash balance plan or things like that. So there's just a lot of things that come with remaining independent that you're not going to see as an associate.
Mm. Fantastic question there. And sorry, answer because Dr. Yale, the next question is for you. And this really is a curious one because it frames what Jeremy just mentioned from your perspective. So, for an associate who wants that greater influence but is not ready for ownership, what leadership opportunities should they look for within a DSO or larger organization?
Yeah, so you can be involved with the ADA even at your society level. So if you're in, let's say, LA County, they actually have multiple. So they have like San Fernando Valley Dental Society or Ventura County. So it's just county based. So you can be involved in that or at the state level, or, there's the national ADA. But outside of that, I think it just comes down to how much you want to do. So, for example, for me, I am now in a practice in Thousand Oaks. I feel like the demographic that I really feel for are elderly folk. I see a lot of them in my office, and a lot of people are quite lonely. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to go to the senior homes and do some oral health presentations. And also just spend time with people. Um, I think just find things that you enjoy and do them. Being a leader means just just doing things, trying things. There's also a lot of dental tech that nobody talks about as like a clinician. There's a lot of different like AI companies, revenue cycle management companies, a lot of tech focused orgs that don't actually have clinician perspective. So that's something else that I've been kind of involved in through like venture capital funding. That's a whole separate topic, but there are a lot of aspects to the industry as a whole outside of just clinical dentistry and, owning an office.
So, how do you get into it per se?
For me personally, I have like an interest in this stuff, so I just message people on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing." I go to conferences a lot, so there is Midwinter, which is in Chicago in February, and that's the largest like ADA meeting. So you'll learn a lot about not only materials and CE classes, but you'll learn a lot about just the different companies that are coming up. There's also ADSO, which just happened in Chicago. There's Women in DSO, and then there's Dykema, which is actually Dykema is a law firm, but they do conferences for dental stuff in Denver. So those are like the big four. So if someone was wanting to be more involved in the industry as a whole, I would go to those. Especially people that are more like fringe, right? So like for instance, Jeremy, he is a CPA, but he specializes in dentistry. So he could go to one of these conferences, meet a bunch of dentists, and then yeah, stuff like that.
And we also
Mm,
get
absolutely.
periodically we get asked to speak at those conferences, because a portion of that conference might be tied to management of the practice or the business side of dentistry, or it might be something as simple as, help us design our chart of accounts for a dental office and what that should look like, and or retirement plans and different unique strategies for building wealth outside the value of the practice, things like that.
Absolutely. And Brian Callow from Dykema is actually a friend of ours as well, was there in one of our events just, I think, last quarter. So absolutely. Thanks so much for that reminder, Dr. Yale. And yeah, it's great to get out there, go meet some people really, and just get out of your bubble. Now, Jeremy, before a dentist starts, buys, or becomes a partner in practice, what cash flow, tax, debt, and personal financial risk should be evaluated first? Which one goes?
Well, I would say I I hate to say this because it sounds so negative, but I always kind of approach things from what's the worst thing that can happen? What happens if things don't go according to plan? And so I usually talk about, evaluating your cash flow, evaluating your personal living expenses, your practice overhead, your debt service requirements, including like student loan payments, et cetera, and making sure that you have enough emergency reserves to, you know, be able to weather a storm. So that's the first thing is cash flow. And then the second thing is debt. I would evaluate your debt. Many dentists already carry a substantial student loan debt. That's very
Mm,
common coming out of school. So adding a practice acquisition debt can be very manageable, but only if you have enough cash flow in the practice to support both obligations. So, can they pay for the student loan payments, and can they also pay for the practice acquisition? And are you ready for that? Because sometimes it pays off to practice a couple years, get your feet under you, make sure that you're producing enough to maintain the cash flow before you buy into a practice and just get the feeling of what it's like. Um, and then taxes is another area that I would evaluate. Definitely, many new practice owners underestimate tax planning, and so actually, Dr. Yale and I were talking about this the other day about entity structure. But entity structure is a big factor. So normally with a new practice ownership, will generally suggest that they start as what's called a single member LLC in Oregon, and then we'll evaluate that kind of year over year, and then ultimately we will convert them to an S corporation at some point. Now you could start out as a corporation and then convert to an S corporation, or you can start as an LLC and then become an S corporation. But generally, we're recommending S corp structure, and then you have to, it's usually the first time you have to evaluate paying estimated tax payments. So the government requires you to pay quarterly estimated payments if you're getting paid in a way that doesn't withhold taxes from your paycheck. And so, this will be a situation Dr. Yale will face very soon is, you'll have to make quarterly estimated tax payments to cover your tax obligations. And if you don't do that, there's a penalty for underpaying those payments. So it's really good to get a handle on that early in your practice life to know what that's going to look like before it hits you as a surprise. Um, I would say probably 25% of my new dental clients came to me because they got surprised by some type of tax event that they were unaware of, and so they'll come to us and say, "Hey, I'm confused. I don't know why I owed so much in taxes and penalties. I didn't get the best advice. Can you help us?" And so uh, the taxes are a huge area of concern. And then
Mhm.
I mentioned this earlier, but it's also the personal risk
That's
is also something that should be evaluated. So like, if you have major family obligations where you're not able to commit the time, you might, consider whether or not practice ownership is something you're interested in doing. Um, are try not to bite off more than you can chew in personal debt obligations like a home purchase. There's a lot of doctors that graduate and think they should own a very fancy home and pay way more for their home than they should. And that kind of puts, I always say, don't jeopardize the mothership, which is the practice. Um, but I always say, don't jeopardize that, which means like don't borrow more than you can pay. Um, you know, so, you know, make sure you're considering your personal finances before you're, um, investing in a practice. It's a fantastic investment. So, um, but you definitely have to take into account, all of the aspects of personal finance and your personal living situation before you jump into it.
Jeremy, I know it's not very easy to answer this question, but can you give us a rough estimate of how much of personal finances should be in the bank before you even consider, or rather, before you begin the consideration of really investing in a practice and going that route?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of rules of thumb that accountants and financial advisors give folks to have it as a buffer as a but I'd say if you're in the process of buying a practice, I'd like to see at least 6 months living expenses in a personal financial reserve. And then typically inside of a practice, I usually try to get practices to generate, you know, at least a reserve that equals 1.5 months of operating expenses is usually my baseline. Um, because if you have a bad production month, you want to be able to make sure you can make payroll. I also recommend that you always have a line of credit, both personally and also for the practice, in case you need to tap into that for unknown reason. Now, I don't want you using the line of credits. I just want them there as an emergency buffer, just in case things don't go well. So, um, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for that because we really love benchmarks and also getting some kind of idea. It might not be, exact, right? Every situation is different, but it's always good to have an idea of like when am I eligible to even consider this option as a
Sure.
career path. So appreciate that. Uh, Dr. Yale, during the first 90 days in a new practice or organization, what warning signs may indicate that the culture, leadership, or clinical environment will not support a dentist's long-term development?
Hmm. I would say the first 30 days anywhere, you should just observe. Don't try to change things, kind of just see how things operate. Um, I think not having clear leadership or if it's an office that's had like a ton of turnover all the time, you would be kind of curious as to why that's going on. So clear leadership, consistent, staff. Um, what else? Making sure that they are kind of following through with maybe the things that you had discussed prior, right? So if you said, hey, we're going to review treatment plans for the first month, or we're going to have monthly check-ins, making sure that those things are really happening. And making sure that your compensation is really clear. In a DSO setting, you don't really need to worry about this, but in private offices, just making sure you understand like how you're getting paid, what your contract says. If you had no contract and it was just a handshake deal, are they following through on their end with what was discussed? Things like that.
Yeah, handshake deals are great contracts, aren't they? Uh, Uh, that's a great look. And we will be moving into a very interesting segment of ours, which is a Ask Me Anything session. I do have a couple of questions that I had picked up from our community itself that aligned with our topic that I will be prompting as warm-ups. But please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box, or else the chat is even fine. I'll pick them up from there and ask our panelists. So let's see. This first question is from, okay. Uh, all right. Panelists, please feel free to answer them as you like. So, a DSO is offering me more than a private buyer, but part of the money depends on me staying for 3 years. How do I compare those offers? Jeremy, would you like to start us off on this?
Sure, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I think my general my experience working with DSOs and clients that have actually sold to DSOs, um, I think what usually happens is they offer you a cash, down payment. Basically, this is what we're going to pay you today, and then there's an earnout period. So you're gonna have to work for 3 years, and you're gonna have to work and meet benchmarks in order to get the rest of that earnout, which can sometimes be a very difficult benchmark to meet. And so generally what I'll recommend is that you do an evaluation of like, hey, if I sell this practice today, this is how much I'm gonna get to a traditional buyer, and then here's what I'm going to get from the DSO, and not factor in the earnout. Um, and your hope is that those two numbers initially are going to be about the same. And like I said earlier, that earnout money would be a bonus. And then you'd evaluate that earnout compared to what you would have made in your practice had you worked for another 3 years. And then,
Mhm.
evaluate between the two of those. Um, Keep in mind that oftentimes DSOs will promise that they'll do certain things that don't always come to fruition. They say they're going to handle staffing, they say they're going to handle hiring, but then if you stay for 3 years, it generally is left to you to make sure people show up to work and they're producing and they're doing the things that you need them to do to keep the practice operating efficiently. I've had situations where I, I've had situations where clients have sold to a DSO and they've been extremely happy, and I also have clients that have sold to a DSO and they've been very unhappy. And the ones that are unhappy are mostly non-financial reasons. It's like, hey, I thought they were going to help with contracting and they're not, or I thought they were going to help with hiring and they're not, or I thought they were going to help find me a good hygienist, and they didn't. So, but again, sometimes the DSOs work extremely well. So I'm not bad mouthing DSOs in general. I'm just telling you kind of a little bit about where the risks are.
Yeah,
Uh,
anecdotally, from just what I've heard is also the clinical portion of it. So are you remaining clinically autonomous, or are they bringing in a new doc that's going to do more of the diagnosing and treatment planning on patients that you've been seeing for like 20 years, and maybe you disagree with the treatment plan, and what happens at that point, right? Because, you're technically no longer the owner. There's factors like that that are definitely important to think about.
And I was just going to
um,
add one more thing, if you don't mind.
of course,
The other
sure,
thing to
sure.
to consider there also is that the initial offer that you typically get from a DSO is negotiable. And a lot of dentists I've worked with think that that's the only option. And so I usually try to negotiate for my dentist to get more money up front that's guaranteed, and have less of it based on that earn out period. And that usually helps it digest better.
Hmm, agreed. So. wonderful tips on ensuring that your earnout does not transform into a burnout. Thank you very much for that, Jeremy. And let's see over here. There was one, is private ownership still a realistic path for someone early in their career, or are we fighting where the profession is going? Dr. Yale, what's your opinion on that?
No, I think there's definitely a place for private practice. There always will be. And I do think it's an option. In terms of it'll be a little bit harder, right? Like Jeremy and I have both been saying, you just have more on your plate, but it's definitely feasible. You know, following the things that Jeremy has been saying, I think are really great tips. Making sure that you have enough cash on hand, making sure that you're on top of all of your staffing and things like that. As long as you're okay with that, I think it's definitely possible. And a lot of people do it and are very successful, especially in the days of like social media, where if you can really promote your practice, it can really take off. There's a lot of ways to promote and make a new office successful for sure.
Okay. Jeremy, do you have anything to add on to that?
No, I would agree 100% with Dr. Yale. I mean, if you are motivated, I think if you're motivated and you have the passion for running a business, it's such a great business. You know, I told both my kids they should be dentists because I love the profession. Um, they didn't listen to me, but at any rate, I love the profession. I think dentistry is amazing. I love the business of owning a dental office. And there's just it's nice because it's a rare type of business that you can generate a lot of revenue in and not have so many employees. And I always go through this metric with my new dental offices that are starting to slowly produce. But you know, it's a really cool business model because in order to have like a $900,000 collection practice, you need about 5 employees. You need 2 hygienists, 2 chairside employees, and an admin person typically. And I have some clients that go all the way up to $2.5 million of collections and still have 5 employees. So what does that tell you between the 900,000 and the 2.5 million? That tells you that the difference between those is almost all profit. I mean, really, you have dental supplies, and just a minimal overhead cost between those two numbers. So I always focus on that when I've got a practice that's at like 900,000, and how do we get you up to, 1.5 or 2 million in production? Because again, the profit just escalates so rapidly.
And that can definitely
Mm,
be related to like your skills, right? So if you now do Invisalign or implants, you're expanding your skill set and that therefore expands your ability to create profitability in your practice. Another thing worth thinking about is as a young female and family planning, thinking about that in terms of your business. So I don't think that's really talked about very much, but it is something to think about. And Jeremy, I'm curious how you guys approach that with private offices that are maybe taking just starting, right? And family planning, especially for women. What does that look like?
You mean like how do they uh
Like taking time off.
y-
Maybe they're the only doctor in the practice and now they want to take some sort of leave.
yeah, so I've had situations like that that worked really well with you have another, female owner, or it's not just female. It could be a male that just wants to spend more time with family. And so you've got the situation happens a lot and on both sides. Um, but I would just say it works really well if you can do kind of an office share. And but the key is the overhead shouldn't change. The overhead should be based on revenue. And like I said, you should be able to go all the way up to like 1.5 to 2, even higher with like 5 employees in a general dentist office. Um, Especially if you're doing implants and, like you said, Invisalign and some of these other cosmetic procedures that pay really well. So um, I just think you can usually find somebody else to do a share, or you pay half share of overhead if you've got two partners or something like that. But we have lots of ways to divide the gold in the practice, based on making sure it's fair and making sure it's equitable, based on, the hours you're working and the revenue that you're producing.
Amazing. That's such a great question, Dr. Yale, first of all, and wonderful answer there, Jeremy. Really, that just shows in a world where the sky is the limit, 2.5 million is possible. It's done by just five people in a practice. It's done. So we really do hope our community that's tuned in take this opportunity to really be inspired if you're not there, and just know it's possible and it's been done. So with that being said, we are approaching the end game here, and I would love a key takeaway round from both our panelists. What's the golden rule if you for a dentist deciding between a DSO path, an associate, or perhaps staying independent? What is the one thing that you wish they would insist they understand before they make the move? Um, Jeremy, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I've seen, I've been working in this industry for about 27, 28 years, and I've seen practices or dentists that have, started as an associate and became an owner of their own practice, or became a group, bought into a group practice. And I've seen it go the other direction. I've seen dentists buy a practice and it didn't work out well, and they basically threw it to the curb and bought a new one. And so I think the biggest mistake that you could make would be thinking that these decisions you're making are permanent, and that you can't change course. So choosing a DSO, choosing an associate position, going into partnership, or owning your own practice isn't necessarily a long-term commitment, a lifelong commitment, I guess I should say. Early in your career, I think you just focus on building your clinical skills and your financial literacy and your leadership, and then, determine whether or not, ownership is something for you, or whether or not it's not. But that doesn't mean it might not change. So I think just making sure that you know that it can be fluid.
It can be fluid. Dr. Yale, how about you? What's
I
our key?
think it goes back to knowing what you want and what you're looking for. At the end of the day, as long as you know that, you can kind of find that, is what I truly believe, and rely on people that know more than you to help you along the way. Um, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, panelists, for that wonderful round of key takeaways. With that being said, if you are interested in ensuring that when your ideal client searches for the treatments that you love offering, perhaps it might be Invisalign, uh, veneers, crowns, in your area, right? When they're searching for those treatments, are you the practice that they find, they trust, and ultimately choose? If you want some insight on that, make sure you book the complimentary practice growth session offered by Echo Marketing, our growth partner here at the Thriving Dentist. You can go ahead and book your session by scanning that QR code, or else the link in the chat is available one last time. All right. With that being said, Jeremy, how can the people find you and the work you do?
You can go to our website at www.jonesandrothcpa. And then, yeah, just you could Google my name. You're probably going to find it. I also was going to mention that we do work with practices nationwide. We are generally, have clients all over the country. So don't feel like if you're not in the Pacific Northwest that we can't work with you. We'd be happy to talk with you if you need help or have questions about anything.
Appreciate that. Dr. Yale, how about you? Where can the people find you and the work that you do?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to message me whenever with questions. Um, I also have a website, Elevated Dental. You can find me there. That's more outside of the clinical dentistry.
Amazing. So with that being said, then, Dr. Yale, Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing this hour with us and giving so much insight and personal experiences, sharing that with our audience here at the Thriving Dentist Expert Panel. It's much appreciated. And to our attendees who have invested this hour in the success of your practice, thank you so much. And of course, as you exit this webinar, a quick feedback survey will pop up on a new browser tab. Please take a minute to fill that out and let us know how we did and how we can do better because we do all of these for you, the dental community. With that being said, it has been my pleasure hosting this session on behalf of Thriving Dentist for y'all. Until the next event, take care, everyone. Oh, and panelists, do stay on the line for a quick debrief. But yeah, attendees, thank you so much. We'll see you on the next Thriving Dentist Expert panel. Take care, everyone. Bye.